At the celestial temple meanwhile. In the grand temple atop the mountain, Yoo Seungwoo sat reading. Though his mind wandered. Suddenly, a notification popped up. Baekhang Hik has completed his mission and unlocked the item storage skill. A thief has emerged in TERRA. The book he was reading contained an entry about this thief. A thief possessing the strength of a warrior. Skilled in stealth and item storage, has stolen countless treasures. The planet Tera, unprepared for this kind of chaos, had descended into turmoil. Yoo Seungwoo froze as he read the words, breaking into a cold sweat. Wait a second, a peculiar exchange. Renato gazed at Yoo Seungwoo with a strange expression. With a soft sigh, Renato asked. Seungwoo, your third divine title is predation. Hearing this, Yoo Seungwoo replied lightly, yes. Renato, however, was growing agitated. You're the god of predation, not some god of thieves. So, what's going on? Can you explain this? Closing his book with a tired expression. Yoo Seungwoo admitted, I underestimated him. My apologies. He began recalling the situation. He's incredibly quick-witted, with stealth as his specialty. But the real problem lies with my own abilities. Your abilities? Renato tilted his head in confusion. What do you mean? Yoo Seungwoo hesitated before explaining. His power grows with recognition. The more infamous he becomes, the stronger he gets. Renato's eyes widened. So, the more people talk about his thievery, the stronger he becomes? Looking somewhat uncomfortable, Yoo Seungwoo nodded. And, unfortunately, I accidentally unlocked his item storage ability. Basically, I gave him wings on a tiger. Now, down in the mortal realm, they're calling him the King of Thieves. And he's already surpassed level 80. Renato was shocked. You, a god with the eye of appraisal? How could you make such a mistake? I was tricked. Yoo Seungwoo admitted, activating his eye of appraisal. Its faint blue glow scanning the situation. This skill allows me to see through abilities and true natures, but even I was deceived. He added firmly, still, he's not evil. He simply has his own sense of justice. Renato frowned. Justice? He has a warped sense of justice if he's acting like this. Yoo Seungwoo sighed. That's because he's from Earth. The people of Tera are naturally good-hearted, but his values are different. Renato covered his mouth in surprise. Are you saying that unless someone shares his earthly perspective, they won't understand his actions? Exactly. Yoo Seungwoo confirmed. Renato's eyes glowed red as he activated the demonic eye of appraisal, a skill that detects evil. Even with this eye, I don't see any malice in him. So, his thefts aren't driven by bad intentions? Renato asked skeptically. No, he's not malicious. Yoo Seungwoo replied. He just... Renato, sensing Yoo's hesitation, finished the sentence for him. Just wants to blow off some steam, right? A faint yes escaped Yoo Seungwoo's lips. Still, Yoo felt the need to justify his explanation. He's under a lot of pressure. Trying to act like a leader when, in reality, he's just a rebellious troublemaker. Renato's eyes narrowed with barely concealed frustration. And he's doing all this in Tera? Why not go back to Earth and cause trouble there? I said I'm sorry, Yoo Seungwoo exclaimed. A divine revelation. Opening his book to check the situation, Yoo Seungwoo found a report. You have received 12.155 experience points from your divine avatar. The reward? 1,000-year vinegar. He chuckled softly. 1,000-year vinegar, unicorn horn, a golden goblin spoon. Looking at the list, Yoo Seungwoo couldn't help but smile mischievously. At least I disabled the sacrificial offering system. But he keeps sending me things voluntarily. His loyalty is surprising. If he knew I was the god he's been serving, he'd be mortified. Despite his amusement, frustration gnawed at him. Still, these treasures he's stealing are all from those wretched nobles. When I was fighting the Demon King, they refused to cooperate. Yet they've been hoarding these high-quality materials all along. A wild idea struck him, and his eyes gleamed with mischief. Should I send him on a mission to rob the royal treasury next? Renato startled him by tapping his shoulder. Seungwoo? Huh, yes? Yoo Seungwoo stammered, turning to face Renato. With a wary tone, Renato said. Your eye of appraisal just flashed. I caught a hint of something sinister in your intentions. Yoo Seungwoo rubbed his nose sheepishly. My bad, it's my avatar's fault anyway, so this is technically my responsibility. If you want, you can handle him yourself. Renato tilted her head, then smiled faintly. All right, I'll send one of my avatars to deal with this. Back in the mortal realm, Baekhang was plotting his next theft as usual. Completely unaware of the storm brewing above. A sudden ambush, as Baekhang muttered to himself. Should I make a bit more money? He suddenly felt a presence behind him. Before he could react, Renato's true form launched an ambush. Shouting, "Punishment!" Beck jolted awake from his dream. His heart racing, a startling awakening. Nabi, a cat-like companion, hurried over. "Are you okay?" Meow. Beck blinked, glancing around in confusion. Where am I?" Nabi explained gently. "You're at the rice shop." Meow. "You look exhausted, go home and get some rest." Meow. Still disoriented, Beck rubbed his temples. "I only remember my neck being cut by someone called the executioner." Checking his phone, Beck froze. A whole day had passed. His face darkened as the realization hit him. Was it all just a dream? Unwilling to accept this, he screamed. Status board. Gripping his phone tightly, he muttered, "This can't be right. 6 months in Terra, I need to check the game system." The screen displayed his current level. Level 43, shock and gratitude, still shaken. Beck yelled, "Level 43? Even if I'm a genius. Jumping from level 28 to 43 in a single night is impossible." Quickly regaining his composure, he knelt down abruptly. This means, he clasped his hands together and shouted, "Oh, thank you, I love you, oh god of predation." Overwhelmed with joy, Beck kissed the floor repeatedly. I love you, I love you." He began dancing and shouting at the top of his lungs. "That's it, when I return to the front lines, I'll use my influence to build a statue in honor of the god of predation." An awkward situation. Meanwhile, Yoo Seungwoo, observing from afar, covered his ears in embarrassment. "Stop it, you idiot," Beck, oblivious, continued. "No, not just a statue, I'll build a whole shrine." Yoo Seungwoo winced, cringing even harder. "Please, stop already," but Beck only shouted louder. "Amazing, you're the best." At that moment, Minho Keefe appeared and smacked Beck on the head. "Get a grip and stop this nonsense," she scolded. Beck finally quieted down. Rubbing his head in embarrassment. Branch Office A, Isaac Tower. Beck Hangik handed a piece of paper to Minho Keefe with a smug grin. As if boasting about a grand achievement, Minho Keefe squinted at the paper. His face darkening as he read it. An application for a rank-up match? You've never participated in one of these before. His skeptical gaze turned to Beck. Something's going on, isn't it? Beck nonchalantly replied, "Would you believe me if I told you I'm a returnee?" Naturally, Minho Keefe didn't believe him. "You think I'd buy into that nonsense? That you became a returnee in just a few days?" To add credibility, Beck continued. "I'm registering for a rank-up match and challenging opponents ranked from 99 to 90. Minho Keefe, still doubtful, probed further. "But don't challengers need to place a bet? Do you have something valuable enough to satisfy those higher ranked than you?" With pride, Beck raised an A-rank magical sword. "I'll wager this." Minho Keefe was visibly shocked. "An A-rank sword? That's a good one. I can see its value right away." He examined the weapon carefully. "I can't believe you're actually using item storage. This means, you really are a returnee." Beck, grinning, winked at him. "Glad you noticed." Now convinced, Minho Keefe muttered, "All right." Damn it, he pulled a wad of cash from his pocket. "Here's the price for betting," as his teammates stepped out to collect their winnings. They ignored Beck, leaving him in the corner. One of them joked, "I thought you'd use this money to travel after getting caught cheating. I assumed you'd all run off when I won." Another added, "And now he'll probably use that sword to go treasure hunting for Excalibur." Beck, nearby, clenched his fists. "I feel so cheated." "Fine, I'll take the team funds to the casino." Meanwhile, at Yoo Seungwoo's home, Yoo Seungwoo was enjoying a relaxing day, sipping tea while watching the news. The broadcast announced, "Renowned hunter Beck Hang-heek has climbed to rank 92. Yoo swirled his tea thoughtfully. He said he'd break into the top 90, but he didn't even make it past 91. Setting his cup down, he stretched. Well, at least he's not sulking anymore. Crying about dying, even though his blessings and powers were revoked, should I keep them in storage as a souvenir? Feeling bored, you switched channels. I've already prepared food and basic groceries. What should I do now? He stumbled upon a program showcasing YUL fishing grounds. Welcome to YUL fishing grounds. Admission is free during the environmental maintenance period. The idea intrigued him. Fishing, huh? His eyes lit up with excitement. Fishing, without hesitation, you grabbed a jacket off the rack and bolted out the door. A simple escape, you grabbed his fishing gear with a smile. Muttering to himself, perfect, I'll close the shop for today and go catch dinner. After all, it's just a hobby. On his way out, he saw Nabi playing in the yard. He called out, Nabi, the shop's closed today. Go play with Unya. Nabi, thrilled, waved her arms excitedly. Got it, Naya, I'll look after the shop. Naya, Unya, standing nearby, bowed politely. Take care, uncle, smiling warmly at the two. You ruffled their hair, I'll be back soon. The fishing spot, you arrived at a serene lakeside surrounded by white lotus flowers. Standing at the edge of the water, he scanned the area, searching for the perfect spot to fish. With a net and rod in hand, he muttered to himself. This place looks not great, still. He settled in, determined to make the most of the day. A visit to the lakeside cabin. Yoo Seungwoo approached the only wooden cabin in the area, noting the lack of any signboards. An old man peeked out of the window and said, there's no entry fee, but you'll need to rent fishing gear. Want to rent some? Carrying his own equipment over his shoulder, Yoo politely declined. No, sir, I brought my own gear, but do I need bait? The old man nodded and asked for additional documentation. All right, do you have a hunter's license? Yoo replied honestly, I have something similar. Why do you ask? As he spoke, he thought to himself. I do have my written e-certificate. The old man's expression turned grim, and he muttered ominously, that thing has appeared. Yoo tensed up, though he didn't fully understand. That thing? The old man retreated into the cabin, trembling. Monsters, there's a crack at the bottom of the lake. Yoo exhaled in relief. Ah, just a crack? You scared me for nothing. So, there's a crack? The old man, still cautious, explained. A monster might emerge while you're fishing. Only hunters are allowed in here for that reason. Yoo smiled confidently, it's fine. But if monsters are a concern, why is this place open for business? They're even advertising on TV. The old man chuckled, because the business does well. They even secured a long-term TV ad contract. Even if it's just a 2-second ad. Yoo laughed, that's why the ad I saw earlier was so short. The old man asked one final time. So, you're really going in? Yoo replied firmly. Of course, it's worth cleaning up. Cleaning the lake, Yoo was busy gathering trash around the lake. Holding a large sack of garbage in his hands. Surveying his work, he said to himself. This should be enough. He tied up the sack and dusted off his hands. I need to make sure this place stays clean. It's the best spot to relax near my shop. He admired the surroundings, now much more scenic, and thought back to his father. Dad always went fishing whenever he had free time. Looking up at the misty morning sky, Yoo felt a rare sense of peace. It was a welcome change from the constant battles and responsibilities of managing his shop. Memories of fishing with Dad. Yoo recalled his childhood. Fishing was my firefighter dad's only hobby. His father would take him along on his rare days off. Together, they would visit a stocked lake. Hand in hand, his dad would even clean the area before they started fishing. The two of them would sit by the water for hours, catching all kinds of fish, carp, catfish, grass carp, and more. Afterward, they'd take their catch home and enjoy a meal together. You could almost taste his dad's spicy fish stew. A dish so delicious it felt like a reward for their hard work. No other meal ever came close to that level of satisfaction. Back to the present, vivid memories fueled Yoo's excitement as he rested his fishing rod on his shoulder. That's why I love fishing. It connects me to those days. He cast his bait into the water with the eagerness of a child. Enough cleaning. Time to fish for the first catch. As he watched the vibrant flowers floating on the water, he couldn't help but marvel. Hard to believe the water here is so murky with all these beautiful lotus flowers. Is it because of the crack? He thought aloud, if the water quality worsens, the fish population will dwindle, leaving only a few low-quality species. A sly grin spread across his face. In other words, the fish here. Suddenly, the line tightened. Something had taken the bait. Excited, Yoo pulled hard on the rod. This must be the best ingredient to create predation cuisine. By the lake, nearby, a fishing rod bent under the weight of a catch. Yoo Seungwoo tightened the line and reeled it in, curious to see what he had caught. The fish wasn't particularly large, but it was just enough for his cooking plans. However, his expression turned sour upon seeing it. You again, he muttered, disappointed. The fish was none other than the humpback goby, a species despised by anglers everywhere. These fish were notorious for appearing almost everywhere, ruining lines, and getting hooked no matter the bait. Though common. There was one undeniable truth about the humpback goby. Its flavor was absolutely terrible. Anyone brave enough to eat it usually regretted it immediately, describing the taste as like chewing on dirt and sand. Not only was it awful to eat, but preparing it was equally punishing. The fish emitted a foul odor that lingered for hours. The worst part? Its bones were incredibly tough and sharp, often causing painful injuries to anyone who tried to eat it. Images of past victims sprawled on the ground in agony flashed through Yoo's mind. Truly, this was the least desirable fish to catch. But Yoo grinned mischievously at the sight of the fish. No problem, this is exactly what I wanted. His sinister smile hinted at a bigger plan. A new visitor. From a distance, a man approached. It was Lee Jonhan, a supervisor from the Isaac Disaster Management Department. It's been a while, he muttered to himself as he surveyed the area. Standing before the dilapidated fishing site, Lee rubbed his temples in frustration. This place has deteriorated so much. It used to be beautiful. Suddenly, he spotted the old shopkeeper peeking out of the cabin. The shopkeeper quickly covered his face and darted back inside. Slamming the door behind him, Lee let out a sigh. It's been 9 years. Years ago, the owner of the Ford fishing grounds had asked Lee to address issues in the area. But as a frequent visitor back then, Lee had made the decision to decline. I thought it wasn't worth wasting resources, Lee reflected, now regretting his choice. But after all this time, no one's come to help. Walking over the cracked and weathered ground, Lee mumbled. According to the reports, fishing here is still possible. But with the slime infestations, this place barely qualifies as F rank. Meeting Yoo Seungwoo, as he walked around, Lee spotted a young man by the lake. Yoo Seungwoo, busy fishing. Hello. Yoo greeted cheerfully, noticing the newcomer. Hello. Lee replied, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. This guy, he's the returnee. Yoo Seungwoo, what a troublesome person to run into. Lee's gaze drifted to Yoo's bucket, overflowing with humpback gobies. Why are there so many humpback gobies in here? Lee asked, visibly annoyed. Without hesitation, Yoo replied, I'm catching them for cooking. For cooking? Lee looked puzzled. You're planning to use humpback gobies for food? With a smile as radiant as a pageant winner, Yoo nodded. Yes, they're great ingredients. In fact, they're perfect for making weapons. My dish made with these gobies could easily become a biological weapon. Lee's face twisted in discomfort. Is he seriously planning to send hunters to the afterlife with a dish made from humpback gobies? Though he detested the idea, Lee forced himself to speak calmly. I don't know if you realize this, but you can't sell dishes like that as biological weapons in your restaurant. You're treating your customers pretty badly. You didn't seem fazed. He simply chuckled and smiled awkwardly, smiling outside, questions inside. Though Yoo Seungwoo kept a pleasant smile on his face, his mind raced with questions. Does he know I'm a restaurant owner? If so, he must be connected to the forces managing the gate. With a friendly tone, Yoo said. Ah, my apologies, I was too focused on fishing and didn't explain myself clearly. I don't plan to sell these fish, he finally elaborated. I'm just planning to use them as weapons to deal with the slime around here. Lee Jonghun, puzzled, asked. Deal with slime? The question made him ponder deeply. So, he's planning to take down other monsters with these awful fish? Yoo continued casually, reeling in another fish. This fish could kill a dragon, so slime shouldn't be an issue. Lee's jaw dropped in shock. Dragons are officially recognized as the strongest and most formidable monsters to fight. And he kills dragons by cooking? Lee thought, stunned by the absurdity of the statement. He turned away briefly, trying to maintain composure. Is this Ritterney joking? No, he's the same Ritterney who cleared an SS-Rank gate. So he's probably telling the truth, deciding to engage further. Lee asked, you're seriously saying you can capture slime using just food? Of course, it's incredibly simple. Yoo replied with complete confidence, dragon bait. Lee's mind conjured up a ridiculous image. He makes it sound like using insect spray on bugs. Completely overconfident. Yoo, with a smug grin, explained. A dragon is just a big lizard that knows magic. They're not that hard to deal with. Sure, they're strong, but their self-control is terrible. And they're easily manipulated by their desires. Feigning a friendly expression, he continued. They're easy to trap, it's just like fishing for carp. Carp? Lee echoed incredulously. Yoo nodded with a sinister glint in his eye. In my experience, all you need is bait, no matter the dragon species. They all have one thing in common. Flashback, the red fossil. The memory shifted to a time when you carried a peculiar item. The red fossil, a square, molten artifact. Standing over the defeated Crimson Dragon. The right-hand servant of Demon King Celius. He smirked. The only reason I managed to defeat it was. As you held up the fossil, his confidence radiated. Its overwhelming scent offered a flavor no dragon could resist. Not even Celius himself. Back in reality, Lee pressed further. But I've heard dragons can eat anything without issue. That's true. You admitted, so what did you feed it? Lee asked, growing more curious. You grinned proudly. My ultimate dish. To put it simply, it's an unbeatable monster-killing meal. He added, monsters go absolutely crazy for it. Of course. The finishing blow is still done with a sword. My teammates insisted on that. At least they wanted to look like they contributed. The ultimate dish. Lee's surprise deepened. An ultimate dish? Such a thing exists? You nodded. I told you. My cooking is both a weapon and the perfect bait. That's exactly what I'm using to catch slime here. Lee struggled to wrap his mind around the idea. After a moment, he glanced at Yu's fishing rod and asked, is there anything I can do to help? Yu responded, I haven't caught enough humpback gobies yet. I need over 60 more. Lee stood abruptly. His face set with determination. Let's finish this today, he declared. Immediately agreeing to assist you with unwavering resolve. The food of the gods. The scene shifts to the Roman gods. The god of wine and the god of food. Whose dishes and drinks symbolize immortality. The food of the gods was said to bestow great blessings upon mortals who consumed it. But among the divine creations, there was one dish, a dish of predation cuisine. That was the antithesis of immortality. A deadly creation, capable of killing even the gods themselves. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Yoo Seungwoo's ambition. Yoo Seungwoo pondered, the Ragnarok I made before was just a crude imitation. The cooking process is incredibly complex. And the ingredients are almost impossible to find. Despite its flaws, even the imitation dish had been enough to bring down Kiri's. A godlike opponent. Looking at the bucket of humpback gobies, Yu's thoughts churned. What would happen if this terrible, ordinary fish were cooked using the Ragnarok recipe? A mischievous grin spread across his face. Ragnarok. Freshwater edition. Should I name it the humpback goby of destruction? He watched the gobies swim in the clear water. If I keep experimenting, one day, I'll create a 6-star dish. He murmured to himself. As time passed, darkness blanketed the lake, and Yu and Lee Jong-hun finally finished fishing. Reflections by the fire. The two sat down to rest. Yu asked casually, do you visit this fishing spot often? Lee Jong-hun replied, I used to. It's been 9 years now. Lee reminisced about the past. This place wasn't always like this. Years ago, it was a prime location. There were plenty of catfish and carp instead of these gobies. And the lake water was crystal clear. He recalled his happiest times. Back then, whenever I had a big catch, the manager would cook mientong for me. The taste was incredible. Yu's eyes lit up. The manager cooked for you? Lee nodded, smiling. He was a famous chef. His cooking skills were exceptional. I've tried mientong all over the country, but his was the best. Looking into the distance, Yu said, I hope I get to taste it someday. The cooking begins. With determination, Yu stood up. Well, time to start cooking. Good luck. Lee called out. Yu poured 2 large bottles of water into a massive basin. Then, with a snap of his fingers, he ignited the fire beneath it. Lee watched in awe, lighting a fire without any fuel. Incredible. His astonishment was evident. It's like magic. Or alchemy. Lee remembered Yu's earlier words. This dish is also a weapon. It now seemed more like a spell than mere cooking. The recipe for destruction. Yu concentrated, recalling the steps of the humpback goby of destruction recipe. Add a ton of cleaned humpback gobies to a pot of fresh water. Season generously with salt, black pepper, soy sauce, and more. Stir until it boils. Lee, standing behind, couldn't help but ask, are you really cooking? Yu smiled and replied, yes, I am. Please stay quiet. I need to focus completely. Channeling power into the dish. Pouring his full concentration into the dish. Yu whispered, Ragnarok. He channeled his energy into the pot. And a brilliant green light emanated from his body, illuminating the surroundings. This dish, capable of slaying gods and elevating mortals beyond the limits of divinity, began to take form. The faint aroma hinted at the deadly potential of what was brewing. An unstoppable force of culinary destruction. The challenges of cooking Ragnarok. To create Ragnarok, the process is extraordinarily complex. The key techniques involve mastering true flame, the essence of eternal life, and the power of death. The consequence of eating Ragnarok is harrowing. Those who consume it endure eternal destruction and rebirth in a cycle that doesn't end in death. Through this process, their original body shatters, and they are reborn with a new one. The miraculous result? A body that transcends even the divine. Yoo Seungwoo understood the risks but remained wary. However, that's only if someone can endure it. Surrounded by flames, he admitted to himself, even I can't be sure if I'd survive eating it. In the pan, the humpback goby ignited into flames. Especially since this fish doesn't offer any buffs. An unseen thread beneath the lake. Lee Jong-hun stood nearby, unsure of what to do as he watched the surreal scene. The cool evening air only added to the strangeness of it all. Is this really magic? He murmured to himself. Deep beneath the lake, an ancient and sinister entity stirred. Known as Form Zero, it was a colossal bioweapon created by the scientists of the Journey of Planet. Originally designed to combat monsters emerging from interdimensional gates, Form Zero had been developed in a laboratory. But during an experiment, it broke free, devouring everything in its path. Having consumed its own planet, Form Zero discovered a dimensional rift and shrank itself to escape into Earth. Now, it was lurking in the lake, waiting for new prey. The encounter with Form Zero. Devoid of fish to consume, Form Zero contemplated surfacing. Just as it prepared to rise, something small dropped into the water. It noticed the peculiar black object, a small box. Its curiosity was piqued. Driven by instinct, the creature engulfed the box in its gelatinous mass. Although a monster, Form Zero possessed intelligence. Interesting, something I've never tasted before. Moments later, it began to relish the flavor. This taste. But soon, its body started disintegrating into the water, screaming in agony. It roared. My cells, they're burning. This is no ordinary toxin. This is a chemical weapon destroying my very essence. Its eyes widened with rage. The humans of this world, how dare they trap me? Despite its pain, it struggled to adapt. I must endure this. If I absorb it fully, I'll become an even more powerful weapon. But the process was unbearable. No, it's burning, I can't. As its body dissolved into the water, it finally realized the truth. This chemical weapon, it's the real deal. Eventually, Form Zero ceased to exist, vanishing entirely. The aftermath. A radiant light spread across the lake as the monster disintegrated. Standing on the shore, Yoo Seungwoo and Lee Jong-hun watched the phenomenon unfold. It's gone, Lee said, uncertainty lacing his tone. But how can we be sure it's truly destroyed? Yoo sighed deeply. There's no way to tell. Guess I'll have to check the crack myself. Exploring the rift. Descending into the lake. Yoo inspected the crack. His eyes widened at what lay before him. This? Before him was a massive, gelatinous mass. A remnant of Form Zero far larger than any ordinary slime. This thing isn't just a slime. It's comparable to a demon king, he thought. Though most of the slime had dissolved, the remaining bits still oozed and pulsated. For now, this seems like a temporary solution, he concluded. As you observed, he felt an unfamiliar sensation. Energy coursed through his body, as if he were absorbing something. No way. After a moment of disbelief, realization dawned on him. Level up, he muttered. Stunned. The remnants of Journia. Yoo Seungwoo continued assessing the situation. So, that means. He looked up at the massive slime before him, analyzing it carefully. This creature was once the slime demon king. The very entity that ravaged its home planet. And I accidentally destroyed it. Using cooking. And now, I've leveled up. Its strength far exceeded my expectations. Reflecting on the earlier events, Yoo sighed in relief. This slime. For all its power. Its tolerance for unusual food was abysmal. As he turned to leave, the slime began showing faint signs of revival. It was once strong enough to throw an entire planet into chaos. Looking around at the slimy remnants scattered everywhere, you thought. If this thing had been able to absorb the dishes of cooked, Earth would have been in serious danger. A curious discovery. You crouched down to examine the soil. This planet. It doesn't have mana. But the soil is incredibly fertile. Could that be why the slime was weak to magic? Scooping up a handful of dirt, he inspected it closely. Fertile indeed. If that's the case, he clenched his hand, causing the dirt to scatter. This would make excellent planting soil. Looking back at the slime's remnants, he declared. Perfect. By clearing this slime from this unclaimed land, doesn't that make me the rightful owner? As a man of action, he wasted no time. I need to establish my claim here. Marking the land will do. A glowing circle appeared beneath his feet. You began casting a spell at his location. I should also create a portal to connect this place to my basement, he muttered, repeating the thought as he worked. At the ISAC branch office. The next morning. At the ISAC branch office in Zone A, Lee Jong-hun burst into his office. Excitement radiating from him. All the monsters have been eradicated. And the rift has been closed. It's such a relief, he exclaimed. A nearby assistant asked eagerly. Sir, about the poison that destroyed the slime. Can we study it? If possible. I think we should weaponize it. It could be the discovery of the century. The assistant continued enthusiastically. As long as I know the ingredients used. Recreating it should be possible. You just need to introduce me to the creator. Lee's expression darkened. Weaponize? What are you talking about? You don't understand. Do you? The assistant looked confused. My apologies, sir. Lee sternly replied. Ingredients? Humpback goby. Salt. Pepper. And garlic. That's it. Pausing for effect. He added. And let me tell you how it was made. You mixed the ingredients thoroughly while boiling them in water. The assistant blinked in disbelief. Struggling to comprehend. That's it. Lee sighed. Clearly exasperated. Yes. Exactly. That so-called poison was nothing more than a ridiculous dish called the destruction of humpback goby. The assistant was overwhelmed. His mind spinning. You're saying it's possible to kill slime with just food? His brain felt like it was overheating. Error. After a long pause. He finally regained composure and muttered. I'll just write I don't know in the report. That sounds reasonable. Lee agreed with a resigned shrug. As the assistant left, Min O'Keefe walked in. A lesson in understanding. Now do you understand the skill level of my teacher? Min said with a smirk. Lee frowned slightly. You brats are all so sharp. How do you know this has anything to do with the attorney? Min sighed dramatically. It's not me. You're just too easy to read. Boss. Lee raised an eyebrow. What? Are you psychic or something? Nope. Min replied casually. I don't have that kind of skill. Lee took a deep breath. Calming himself. Never mind. I see now why you said all those things about him. Min grinned triumphantly. Finally. You get it. A sudden fluster. Lee Jong-hun thought about the young man, his face turning slightly red with embarrassment. Honestly, even though we're both men, I have to admit, there's something strangely captivating about him. His forearms when he was fishing. Absolutely incredible. Min O'Keefe sighed deeply. Clearly exasperated. The leadership styles between you two are like night and day. Lee scowled. Who are you talking about? You brat? Raising his voice. Lee shouted. When it comes to leadership, there's no proof he's better than me. Problem solving and guiding people are two completely different things. Min, sensing Lee was getting carried away, intervened. I wasn't comparing you two. I was comparing the teacher to Beckhang Hik. Lee paused. Flustered. Oh, I see. Well, anyone's better than that guy. Trust and admiration. Min, trying to reassure him, said. You're in the top 3 most reliable people I've ever known. Manager. Second place is the Secretary General. Hearing this, Lee raised an eyebrow in concern. The Secretary General? Right. That guy. He's certainly reliable. Min nodded. He's completely different from the teacher. But still, you can trust him. Wouldn't you agree? Lee snorted. Different? They're as different as recovery and horror movies. Min laughed. More like a hero of justice versus an anti-hero. The Secretary General. The reason I respect him, Min explained, is because Secretary General Isaac Joo Hyuk Jin is a cold, calculating individual who will use any means necessary to get results. His reflexes are so sharp that they leave people speechless. And his ability to make precise decisions never fails him. These traits, Min noted, were the 3 phrases most often used to describe him. Lee shivered at the thought. The day Secretary General Joo Hyuk Jin and Yoo Seungwoo meet. He imagined a catastrophic scenario unfolding in his head. I don't think I'd have the confidence to control that situation. A special privilege. Placing a hand on Min's shoulder, Lee spoke with a tone of earnest trust. Listen, Min. His face radiated a mix of determination and desperation. As the branch manager, I'm granting you a special privilege. Min looked puzzled. What kind of privilege? Lee quickly replied, as if unburdening himself of a heavy weight. From now on, don't tell me anything about the returnee. Yoo Seungwoo, don't share. Don't report. Nothing. Min's face turned purple with anger. What kind of privilege is that? You're basically asking me to take this to the grave. Lee shrugged and said, if I know, then the Secretary General will know too. Sometimes, ignorance truly is bliss. Remember that. Now, report today's activities. A heated exchange. Min's frustration only grew. Fine. Today, I visited the store. Lee quickly covered his ears. The store? Kid. I told you not to report these things. Ignoring him, Min raised his voice as if to scold him. I sensed something unusual in the basement of the store. I'm reporting it because I'm worried it could be contagious. Lee pretended not to hear, shouting. Ah, I'm not listening. He turned away and began singing South Korea's national anthem. Though the East Sea dries up and Mount Baekdu wears away. This childish behavior only infuriated Min further. Storming out with his head burning hot, he muttered. He's acting like Baek Hang-kook. What kind of grown man is this childish? Curiosity and concern. As Min he left, he couldn't shake the lingering thought. What exactly is in the basement? Though he could only sense faint traces of its presence. The feeling was undeniable. It was like the aura of a boss monster. In the basement of the Warriors restaurant. The basement, a gift from Seungwoo's former colleague Renato, housed a rare and peculiar creature. A pudding slime. This creature, highly sought after, had the unique ability to produce sweet pudding in exchange for leftover scraps. Alongside it was another resident. A shy emerald slime and its companion. A timid green slime, both clinging to survival. Unbeknownst to them, danger was near. The return of Formula Zero. The fearsome Formula Zero. Though its body had been oxidized and nearly destroyed by the destruction of Humpback Gobi, had managed to survive. By adapting and fragmenting itself. Formula Zero had preserved its essence. It had slipped through the portal Yoo Seungwoo created. Seeking new opportunities. Staring at the slimes in the basement. Formula Zero thought to itself, perfect. These creatures look like me. If I absorb them, I'll return to my former self. Its naive logic drove it forward with determination. I'll absorb you all and reclaim my power. Formula Zero easily consumed the emerald slime, expecting to grow larger. But, to its frustration, its size remained unchanged. Why am I not getting bigger? It thought, seething in silent rage. Even though my color changed, I'm still the same size. Formula Zero's frustration. Lacking vocal cords. Formula Zero could only curse silently. Isn't there any useful skill here I can steal? Moments later, it released a golden substance. The remaining green slime stared at it in confusion. What is this? Basic splitting? If it takes this much effort, it must be a powerful skill. An unexpected visitor. Suddenly, a voice interrupted. That's pudding, a type of food, said the newcomer. Formula Zero froze in fear. The terrifying voice belonged to none other than Yoo Seungwoo. Standing before it, Seungwoo's face radiated an eerie calm. You came through the portal I created, didn't you? And you're still alive? Not bad. His expression shifted to one of annoyance. But it looks like you've absorbed my pudding slime. Instead of scolding, Yoo's voice turned mocking. Judging by your unchanged size, I'm guessing you've lost your ability to grow larger. Am I right? Formula Zero trembled. Impossible. Yoo leaned closer. Ah, I forgot. You can't speak without vocal cords, can you? The final confrontation. Yoo's tone grew more menacing. Even though I usually try to remain calm, I'm a bit irritated that you ate my pudding slime. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, with a fearsome glare that could rival any villain. He raised his weapon. This has gone far enough. I'll end you in one strike, he declared. His voice cold. Formula Zero let out a terrified shriek. Eek! A surprising taste test. Yoo Seungwoo examined the golden substance he had picked up. Puzzled, the green slime nearby looked on, confused and nervous. When you squeezed the substance, it felt soft and gelatinous. This came from the pudding, he muttered. Then popped it into his mouth without hesitation. Let's see. To his surprise, the taste was apple. No mint apple. After a moment, he concluded. No. It's a flavor I've never tasted on Earth or Terra. Glancing at the trembling slime clutching its head, he thought. Is it because this comes from another world? As he deliberated further, Yoo grew contemplative. What should I do with this? It tastes better than the pudding slime's previous product. But it's still the slime demon king. Morally, I can't let it live. The slime, terrified, thought, you're deciding whether to kill me, aren't you? Suddenly, Yoo declared. I've made my decision. He stood up decisively. A strange proposal. Yoo spoke to the trembling slime. First, I'll look at your memories. He sheathed his sword and retrieved an item. A time loop orb. This, he explained, holding the orb aloft, is a divine artifact. It allows me to glimpse the memories of my target. The slime, oddly, seemed pleased at this development. He's going to read my memories? You brought the glowing orb closer, and a radiant light pulsed as if rewinding time. Sitting quietly, Yoo immersed himself in the vision. Meanwhile, the slime shrank back nervously, watching for his reaction. When Yoo opened his eyes, his expression remained calm but thoughtful. The slime, however, was trembling more than ever. Why is he mumbling like that? This bastard is terrifying. I'm going to cry at this rate. An unexpected meeting. A few days later, Baek Hang-heek and Min O'Keefe were on their way to Yoo Seungwoo's place. As they walked, Baek casually chatted about strange foods from around the world. There are so many pungent dishes out there. Stinky tofu from China. Kasaya dried fish from Japan. Fermented skate from Korea. It's similar here. The food may smell weird, but you'll get addicted once you try it. Min shrugged. Isn't eating good food a normal thing? Baek shot back. This has nothing to do with flavor. The texture and smell alone are horrifying. As they entered the restaurant, Baek accidentally brushed against something. It felt elastic. What the? He blurted. Startled. Inside, they were greeted by the sight of Mini Formula Zero, casually carrying a tray of items. Baek froze. Boss, what is that? Yoo Seungwoo smiled nonchalantly. That's my new employee and air freshener. Smells nice, doesn't it? Baek leaned in for a closer look. Now that you mention it, yeah. It smells like flowers. Feels like we're on vacation in some warm, southern country. But suddenly, his face turned pale. Wait, no. That's a monster. Isn't it? Yoo shrugged. You can call it that if you want. Baek, unconvinced, insisted. No matter what you call it, it's still a slime. Reaching for his weapon, Baek thought. If this thing starts multiplying, it'll be a huge problem. As someone on the front lines, I can't let this slide. But Yoo Seungwoo remained calm, his smile unwavering. Realizing this, Baek hesitated. Wait, this returnee wouldn't let me get away with it if I hurt his pet slime. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Baek reluctantly pulled out his gun. His face hardened as he steeled himself. No, I have to do what needs to be done. I'm blessed by the gods of swordsmanship and victory. Pausing, he corrected himself. Let's leave out the god of predation. Sounds a bit tacky. The heated debate. Baek Hang-heek gripped his gun tightly and declared. Boss, as someone on the front lines, this is completely unacceptable. Keeping a monster loose in a restaurant. This is nothing like having a shape-shifting cat as a pet. Yoo Seungwoo responded casually. I guess you have a point. So, do you have a solution? Frustrated, Baek yelled. Do you really think there's an easy fix for this? Yoo sighed in exasperation. Really? I was waiting for you too because I thought you'd have an idea. Finally, Min O'Keefe, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. It's not impossible to solve this. He gently picked up the slime, cradling it in his hands. But first, I have a question. Min stroked the slime affectionately, ignoring its protests. What kind of slime is this exactly? It's different from normal slimes. Their bodies are usually acidic. But this one is harmless. Plus, it smells good and feels soft. The slime squirmed in irritation. Let me go. Do you know who I am? How dare you treat me like a pet? You answered cheerfully. Oh, I removed all the toxins from its body last night. Min nodded in understanding. Ah, I see. Well, in that case, there's a way. You should report one of your skills as taming. You looked puzzled. Taming? Min explained. It's essentially the ability to tame and manage monsters. Since you already have a shape-shifting cat, it wouldn't be a stretch. Does this slime have a name? Young Shik, he added nonchalantly. The slime froze. Horrified. That's my name. Min placed the slime back on the ground and continued. As it's a slime, it can be classified as a combat-type creature. You could even receive care subsidies if you register it as a combat monster. But keep in mind, you'd also be summoned if a gate appears. At the mention of gates, you frowned. HMPF, I really don't want to be summoned. Min smirked and suggested. Then falsify the paperwork. Register it as an F-rank slime. Both you and Beck were caught off guard. We can do that? You asked skeptically. Of course. Min replied confidently. You know the branch manager handed over all your issues to me, right? Haha. An unlikely resolution. Feeling more reassured, you replied. Looks like you've figured out everything about young Shik. But it seems like you don't want to dig too deep. The small slime, noticing it was being ignored, started crying. Young Shik? That name? Level 30, former slime demon king. Young Shik. Level 30. Min scribbled some notes and declared. I'll report its rank as F. This won't impact your business. Boss. You smiled brightly. Thanks a lot. No need to be formal. Min replied with a grin. Meanwhile, Beck stood motionless. His thoughts swirling. Branch manager. I think these two are plotting something here. What should I do? He overheard their casual conversation. Do you want some pudding? Yes. If you're offering. A brief respite. Moments later. The shape-shifting cat, Nabi, approached with a tray. Here's your coffee. Naya. Beck reluctantly sat down. Taking a sip of coffee. Damn it. I tried to stop them. But that's enough. Let's just check today's Hunter's menu. Hunter's menu of the day. The day's special included dishes based on available ingredients. Beck scanned the options. Lamb steak. He read aloud. Amazed. Oh. Lamb steak. He quickly placed an order. I'll take 3 servings of lamb steak. Nabi scribbled down his order. Got it. Naya, you sure are a big eater. Naya. A confident declaration. Beck Hang-heek ran his hand through his hair. Striking a confident pose. I'm someone who's returned after living in Tera for half a year. Let me tell you, predation cuisine is no longer a challenge for me. It's just part of my everyday life. Nabi. Impressed. Clapped her paws excitedly. That's amazing. Naya, you know what? Just for today. Your meal is on the house. Beck smirked proudly. His nose slightly in the air. Hey, well. You're certainly a sharp little cat. Young Shik's internal struggle. Young Shik diligently brought out the plate of lamb steak. Inside. However, the slime was conflicted. I can't believe he actually came here to eat this mediocre dish. The people of this world are so bizarre. When the meal was placed on the table, Beck's anticipation grew. It's here. Without hesitation, he cut into the steak and took a big bite. As soon as the flavor hit his tongue, his expression lit up. Yes. This is it. With every bite, the flavor just explodes in your mouth. Compared to Tera's cuisine, this is leagues better. Meanwhile, young Shik watched in horror. I barely survived being eaten. How is he enjoying this so much? A busy day at the restaurant. Suddenly, the door swung open with a loud creak. A group of new customers poured in. Hey, boss. We're here. Welcome. Come on in. Naya. Nabi greeted them enthusiastically. The newcomers wasted no time calling out their orders. Boss. We want to order. Over here. 2. The restaurant quickly became packed, with people shouting orders from every corner. Young Shik worked tirelessly, ferrying dishes back and forth. What is with these people? Stop ordering out and cook your own meals. The slime could only grumble internally as it begrudgingly served more food. Damn this capitalist system. Just wait until I recover my full strength. But as long as Yoo Seungwoo continued suppressing its powers, young Shik's body remained subdued and obedient. By the lakeside. 2 men clinked glasses by the lakeside, sharing a quiet moment. I'm not sure if it's just my mood, but the wine tastes particularly good today, one said, smiling. The other man replied, You've been through a lot, haven't you? With a light chuckle. The first man responded, Ah, it's nothing worth mentioning. The lake owner glanced at the peaceful waters. It seems like everything's back to the way it used to be. In front of them, the calm, clear lake stretched out, exuding tranquility. The two continued sipping their drinks, enjoying the serene view. A gesture of support. Breaking the silence, Lee Young-hun said, "You'll be receiving compensation from the Disaster Recovery Department." He continued, "It's meant to help with environmental restoration and as reparation for your suspended work. It's not a lot, but it should help." The lake owner, surprised, asked, "Really?" Lee nodded and added, "I'm not doing this because of our personal connection. You deserve it." As he spoke, he helped prepare fresh food, the sight of which moved the lake owner to tears. "It's our fault for not providing the support you needed earlier," Lee admitted. The lake owner finally mustered a reply, his voice shaky. "Thank you, branch manager. It's been a tough time." Lee reassured him, "It's all right now. I understand." As the scene faded, only the faint sound of comforting words lingered. "Everything will be fine from now on." At the ISAC branch, South Korea, the scene shifted to the ISAC Korean branch, where Lee Young-hun sat wearily at his desk, dealing with Wang Ji-yun. "A formal dispatch notice has been sent?" he asked skeptically. "Yes. It's official," Wang confirmed, handing him a document. Lee studied the paper, stamped with Isaac's seal of approval. The more he read, the more his concern grew. "It's real," he muttered. "Authorization for the deployment of the mobile armed unit. I can't believe they approved this. I didn't think they'd accept it." Frustrated, he vented. "We're already stretched thin, after enduring the bizarre food challenges. Half the team is on sick leave. We're so short-staffed I had to request reinforcements in desperation. And now they've sent this unit?" Wang, one of the team members who had taken sick leave, tried to justify herself. "But isn't this a good thing? We're finally getting some help." However, her mind wandered, wondering if she could finally take a real vacation. Bali? Hawaii? Where should I go? A puzzling deployment. Lee, trying to calm himself, muttered, "No, the Secretary General wouldn't act without reason." He racked his brain. He hates failure and inefficiency the most. If he's sending this unit, there must be specific conditions attached. Turning to Wang, he asked, "Do you know which unit they're sending?" Wang hesitated, her face paling as she stammered, "It's the Full Metal Heroes from Isaac's command." The words struck like a thunderclap. "The Full Metal Heroes?" Lee repeated, standing up in shock. "They're the best of the best. Why would they send a unit like that here?" After a moment of silence, Lee's expression darkened. "No, it can't be." His mind raced to a chilling conclusion. Could they know about Yoo Seungwoo, the nuclear option? Lee thought about Yoo Seungwoo, an unparalleled Ritterni with power far beyond even the strongest hunters. He's like a nuclear bomb, Lee reasoned. If they're sending the Full Metal Heroes to subdue him in an emergency, that would explain everything. But, his lips curled into a bitter smile. "Ha, how naive." Wang, still clueless, asked, "Branch manager?" Lee abruptly stood. "If our superiors are planning what I think they are, we have to stop them. No matter how elite the hunters are, they can't handle someone like Yoo Seungwoo. They've miscalculated." His urgency left Wang baffled, unable to grasp the gravity of his words. A branch manager's dilemma. Lee Jung-hun buried his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the information he had just received. Should I report this to my superiors? I can't think of any other option. He fell into a deep line of thought. Does the Secretary General know something I don't? After a moment, he reassured himself. No, it's impossible. There's no way. Unless he secretly planted an informant in that restaurant. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, in the kitchen of the Warriors restaurant, CO. Taiji sneezed unexpectedly. Sniffling, he grumbled. This cursed weather. The day's menu included Western-style pork chops and mushroom soup. Using a fork, he elegantly lifted a piece of pork and placed it into his mouth. The peaceful atmosphere enveloped him as he savored the flavors. A friendly interruption. As he enjoyed his meal, a voice startled him. Wow, so wild. Athletes are something else. You finished that in just 2 bites. It was Yoo Seungwoo, clapping enthusiastically. Both Nabi and Yuna joined in, mimicking him. CO. Taiji blushed. It's not because I'm an athlete. Actually, you might be right. After finishing his plate, he hesitated before asking. Could I get another serving? Yoo smiled warmly. Of course. This time, I'll make plenty. Young Shik hard at work. As Young Shik dutifully cleared the table, CO. Taiji thanked it politely. Thank you, little one. Watching the slime work, CO's curiosity grew. Why is there a slime in this restaurant? His eyes reflected concern. Is it really just here to help him? What an interesting guy. The faint floral fragrance emanating from Young Shik caught his attention, making him stare at the slime with increasing intensity. CO. fell into his own thoughts. No matter how peculiar it seems, a slime is still just a slime. But suddenly, the atmosphere around him turned sharp and menacing. I won't let anything harm Yuna. Not even a scratch. Young Shik, noticing the intense gaze, fidgeted nervously. What's wrong with this human? Why is he staring at me like that? Young Shik's thoughts. The little slime thought back to the promise Yoo Seungwoo made. If I work hard, he'll protect me. It remembered all the grueling days spent learning human customs and how to run the restaurant. But now, facing this perplexing customer, Young Shik felt frustrated. What's wrong with this guy? What did I even do wrong? The tension between them was palpable. They glared at each other like rivals. Yoo stepped in, breaking the tension. Yoo Seungwoo suddenly lifted Young Shik into the air. He pinched the slime's cheek like surface playfully. You little rascal. Who taught you to glare at customers like that? Young Shik cried out in protest. I didn't glare at him first. I didn't do anything. Turning to CO Taiji, Yoo asked, are you uncomfortable with the slime? It's just a harmless little creature. CO hesitated before replying. It puts me into a defensive state instinctively. It's troublesome. Everyone seems to react that way when they see it. To lighten the mood, Yoo began tossing Young Shik like a basketball. See? It's so bouncy. You could even use it as a basketball. Young Shik wailed. Ah. CO quickly intervened. Please stop doing that in front of Yuna. She might start copying you. Laughing cheerfully, Yoo reassured him. Haha, it's perfectly safe. Young Shik, however, grumbled internally. Safe for him. Maybe. I'm the one in danger here. An ominous warning. After a deep sigh, CO Taiji spoke seriously. It's probably best to hide the slime right now. Yoo frowned. Why? Finally, CO revealed the truth. The mobile armed unit is on its way here. Yoo blinked in confusion. Mobile armed unit? That's not the local mechanized force. Is it? A history lesson. Without hesitation, CO Taiji began. Let me explain. Should I give you the full story or just a brief summary? I've got time. Yoo Seungwoo replied casually. Give me the full explanation. All right. CO Taiji nodded. Then let's start from the beginning. The birth of the mobile armed unit. In this world, there are the awakened, hunters with extraordinary abilities. Hunters are those who fight and slay monsters spilling out from gates and rifts. They serve as humanity's shield, but their numbers are few. Ordinary people began to question. Do we always have to rely on others just because we're not awakened? Can we continue to live under their protection forever? Eventually, they rose up, declaring, we want to fight too. To do so, they needed weapons capable of piercing the hearts of monsters and armor that could protect their vulnerable bodies. At the same time, Cyberdyne, the world leader in technological development, responded to the demand. The result was the creation of single-use combat mechs. Yoo's curiosity. The scene shifted in Yoo Seungwoo's mind to a visual of the combat mech. A disposable robot? Yoo asked, still trying to wrap his head around it. A machine that humans can pilot and use to fight monsters. Kaji explained. Yoo's interest piqued. Wow, that's incredible, he exclaimed. Already fantasizing about having one for himself. But why are they coming here? What do they want with this slime? Kaji added cautiously. Well, these mechs have their limitations. The slime threat. Yoo furrowed his brow, voicing his concerns. If a slime manages to get inside one of those machines, the mech wouldn't stand a chance. Kaji nodded solemnly. Exactly, it's happened before. That's why the mobile armed units hate slime so much. Yoo glanced at Young Shik, his expression a mix of sympathy and worry. That does make sense. Arrival of the mobile armed unit. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the mobile armed unit arrived at the ISAC branch. The squad moved in precision, their presence radiating authority. One figure stepped forward, standing taller than the rest. with a sharp, serious tone. She reported. The 6th Rank Mobile Armed Unit is here. I am Captain Woo Hae-na. Branch Manager Lee Young-hun responded cordially. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Lee Young-hun, the branch manager. The meeting begins. As soon as Woo Hae-na met Lee Young-hun, she greeted him with formality. I'm Woo Hae-na, captain of the 6th Ranked Mobile Armed Unit. Lee replied with a polite smile. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Lee Young-hun, branch manager of South Korea. A not-so-welcome flirtation. Woo Hae-na's expression was serious, radiating authority and discipline. Standing nearby, Bae Kang-hyuk couldn't resist, smirking mischievously as he looked at her. Beside him, Min Ok-hee frowned in disapproval, his face a mix of annoyance and confusion at Baek's behavior. Baek, oblivious to their reactions, blurted out. Wow, strong women are totally my type. Both Woo Hae-na and Lee immediately frowned in response. Their displeasure evident, unbothered, Baek stepped closer to her and added. What a waste for someone like you to end up as a soldier and married. No less. Woo Hae-na strikes back. In Baek's mind, a thought brewed. Top-ranked hunters probably feel a little self-conscious about their positions, right? Before he could dwell further, Woo Hae-na smiled faintly, sighed, and then flicked his forehead with surprising force. Disqualified, she said firmly. Sorry, kid, but if you were trying to impress me, you failed. Big time. Holding his forehead in pain, Baek seethed with irritation, while both Lee and Min struggled to suppress their laughter. Thoroughly enjoying the scene, the tour. Later, as Lee showed her around, he said warmly. I'm glad you're here. I've prepared accommodations for you. So please make yourself at home. Woo Hae-na nodded and replied, thank you. Is there anything I should take care of first? Lee shook his head. Not at all. This is your downtime. If you like, why not explore the city a little? Her response caught him off guard. That won't be necessary, she said. I already have a place I'd like to visit. Surprised, Lee asked, a place you'd like to visit? Without hesitation, she replied. I've heard there's a restaurant nearby that serves dishes made with monster ingredients. Shock all around. Her words left the three men speechless. Lee began sweating nervously, frantically waving his hands at Baek and Min. I didn't say anything about that. Baek mirrored the gesture with an exaggerated X sign. I didn't either. Min shrugged, signaling with his hands, not me. Unfazed, Woo Hae-na continued, I've always wanted to try a meal made from monster ingredients at least once in my life. I've heard it's notoriously awful. Isn't it? The group froze in fear, unsure how to respond. The awkward conversation. After a moment, Lee stammered, why yes. That's right. It's absolutely terrible. I wouldn't recommend it. But before he could finish, Woo Hae-na interjected with a grin. I enjoy peculiar foods. I've tried cassia and surströmming before. Her nonchalant mention of the infamous fermented dishes shocked them further. Cassia, she explained, is a fermented salted dried fish from Japan. And surströmming is a fermented herring from Sweden. Both are rather unusual and challenging to eat. Min-ho Keefe's dilemma. When Woo Hae-na mentioned trying cassia and surströmming, Min-ho Keefe managed a strained smile and said, that's impressive. But to be clear, there's a bit of a difference between smelly food and monster meat. Unfortunately for him, Woo Hae-na was incredibly stubborn. She ignored his attempt to dissuade her and instead grew even more excited. If they serve slime too, I'd love to try that, she exclaimed enthusiastically. At this point, Min's emotions were a whirlwind of confusion and terror. This is serious, he thought, panicking. I have to stop her from going there at all costs. Lee Jong-hun's reckless suggestion. But before Min could intervene, Lee Jong-hun had an idea. Actually, he said, I believe the chef at that restaurant has cooked with slime before. Woo Hae-na's eyes widened in surprise. Really? That's amazing. I'll head there right now. Min stood frozen, his mouth agape as he stared at Lee in disbelief. Before he could say anything, Woo Hae-na had already left, leaving the trio behind in stunned silence. The revelation. After a moment, Min slumped in despair. Branch manager. There's a slime at the Hunter's restaurant. Lee nodded knowingly. I know. He keeps it to use in the restaurant. Doesn't he? Didn't he report that it was harmless? Min hesitated. Well, he also has another slime that works there as staff. Lee's face contorted in confusion and fear. his body stiffening like a statue. The argument. Their conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. You should have reported this to me immediately. Lee shouted. Min fired back. You told me not to report anything about it. Isn't that right, branch manager? Lee retorted. But you should have known to report something this important. And how was I supposed to know what's important, when you didn't tell me what to report? Min shot back. The shouting match continued until Baekhang Hyoxide dramatically interjected. Yan. Miscommunication is such a tragedy, isn't it? This is why I always say you should talk more. Neither of them paid him any attention, both turning to yell in unison. Shut up. Woo Hei Na arrives. Meanwhile, Woo Hei Na had reached the hunter's restaurant. As soon as she stepped through the door, both Yoo Seungwoo and Cotaeg were taken aback. As expected, you thought, it's her. The first impression. Woo Hei Na scanned the restaurant with curious eyes. Suddenly, Nabi ran up to greet her enthusiastically. Welcome. Meow. Woo's face lit up in delight. Oh my gosh. Where did this adorable little cat come from? Hello there. Behind the counter, you watched the interaction with a tinge of annoyance. Though internally, he couldn't help but feel impressed. Good job, Nabi, he thought. Then glanced at Young Shik. Now let's see how you perform. Young Shik struggle. Sitting nearby, Young Shik lowered his head in frustration, muttering to himself. This is so difficult. Way too difficult. Despite his visible unease, Woo Hei Na remained oblivious to the slime's presence, completely engrossed in her conversation with Nabi. Young Shik began trembling with frustration. Slimes can change their form if they gather enough strength and focus, he thought, recalling the advice given to him. I've been practicing shape-shifting just like he told me to, he continued. But, reaching his breaking point, Young Shik internally screamed. I can't hold it any longer. The sound of trouble. While browsing the menu, Woo Hei Na furrowed her brows in confusion. Then, hearing a faint splash, she turned toward the sound. I think I just heard a plop. Nabi, startled, jumped into the air before quickly composing herself. With a professional tone, she addressed Woo Hei Na. Dear guest, meow. The slime dish you mentioned is only suitable for desserts, like ice cream or pudding. That's just a note. Meow. Just a note? Woo asked curiously. Does it taste bad? Nabi replied confidently. It tastes great. Meow. But it's extremely high in calories. If you eat too much, you'll become a pig. Meow. Young Six hid in resolve, hiding in the shadows. Young Shik sighed in relief. Phew, I was almost caught. But the more he thought about the situation, the more irritated he became. Why am I hiding from this guest? Anger bubbling within him, he decided to act. Why'd I have to stay hidden in the basement? Why'd I have to sneak around while working? He made up his mind. I can only hold this form for 20 seconds. So I better move quickly and get back to hiding. A bold move. Young Shik leapt off his chair and darted off to deliver food, running as fast as he could. As he passed Woo Hei Na, he felt a pang of anxiety but pressed on. Finally, he gathered his courage, pulled out a chair, and sat next to her. Though his mind screamed in panic. This is so hard. The confrontation. Woo Hei Na turned to him, startled by his sudden appearance. Quickly, she grabbed a napkin to wipe her mouth. Young Shik, nervous, extended a glass toward her. Her startled reaction made her jump slightly. Hey, she exclaimed. Startled. Young Shik froze, panic spreading through him. Woo Hei Na narrowed her eyes and asked firmly. You're a slime, aren't you? Young Six's body trembled violently as sweat began to pour down his translucent surface. Her question caused everyone in the restaurant to pause, their concern for Young Shik evident as they watched the interaction unfold. The confrontation escalates. As soon as Woo Hei Na recognized Young Shik as a slime, she grabbed a knife meant for cutting food and shouted. Slime. With a swift motion, she slashed, sending the cloth draped over Young Shik flying. Before she could strike again, Nabi dashed forward, placing herself protectively in front of the trembling Young Shik. Young Shik, overwhelmed with fear, burst into tears. Woo Hei Na's hatred. Woo Hei Na glared at them, her voice filled with rage as she snarled. Eek. Slime. Her eyes burned with hatred as memories of a traumatic event flooded her mind. A battlefield flashback. On a distant battlefield, Woo Hei Na had fought tirelessly against a swarm of slimes. exhausted and wounded. She had even lost an eye in the chaos. Clenching her teeth, she had cursed under her breath. Damn it. Turning to her squad, she had asked, "Is everyone okay?" One by one, her team responded, "Yes, Captain, somehow. We're fine." But her relief was short-lived as a voice crackled through her earpiece. "This is Bishop." A desperate voice called out. Hearing his voice, Wu Hei-na had frozen, her stomach churning with dread. "Slime has breached the cockpit." Bishop cried, panic evident. "It's trying to melt me. Help me." Gripping her weapon, she had shouted back, "Hold on, Bishop. Push the engine to its maximum. We need to find and destroy it." She had remembered vividly how the combat mech suits were constructed to protect their pilots, but required external assistance to be removed. If a slime infiltrated the mech, the pilot was left with no options but death. Tears streaming down her face, Wu Hei-na had cursed, "Bishop. Cook." The helplessness of that moment still haunted her, fueling her current rage. Back to the present. Shaking with anger, Wu Hei-na gritted her teeth, clutching the knife tightly. "Slime," she hissed under her breath. "I'll kill you." Raising the knife, she prepared to strike. Yoo Seungwoo steps in. Before she could follow through, Yoo Seungwoo intervened. "Dear guest," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "That knife," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "is for slicing pork cutlets, not for use as a weapon." The room holds its breath. As he spoke, Ko Taeg watched Yoo intently, curious to see how he would handle the situation. Yoo turned his determined gaze toward Wu Hei-na and repeated, "It's not meant to be a weapon." The air in the room grew heavy, the tension palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Wu Hei-na's anger. Wu Hei-na glared at Yoo Seungwoo with unrelenting fury. Meanwhile, Yoo observed her calmly, thinking to himself, "I've heard her story from Taeg. I understand why she's acting this way. But doesn't she realize that Kid has his own story too?" Young Six passed. Young Shik wasn't always a slime. After the rifts began opening, monster attacks on civilians became commonplace. One day, a slime attacked a young boy, showing an unusual interest in him. This particular slime had a unique ability. It could absorb knowledge and traits from its prey through digestion. Scientists from Journey captured the slime during an expedition, using it in countless experiments to create a weapon capable of destroying the rifts. The problem was, the slime began to evolve consciousness. The first slime to achieve awareness became the first sacrifice, enduring endless pain during experiments. It didn't feel hatred or anger because it hadn't been taught those emotions. It only knew how to consume. Use perspective. That's why young Shik eats everything. After seeing its memories, I can't see it as just a monster anymore. Young Shik is still just a child. It needs a guardian, not scientists ordering it to eat and destroy, but someone who can teach it right from wrong. A father's defense. Returning to the present, Yoo Seungwoo faced Wu Hei-na with a serious expression. "What exactly do you think you're doing to my child?" he asked. She froze, stunned. "Your child? That slime is your child?" Young Shik, who had been trembling, felt tears well up as the words sank in. Yoo continued, "It's a registered, tamed monster. Is there a problem with that?" Wu Hei-na clenched her teeth in frustration and hissed, "Tissage." Holding back. Internally, Wu Hei-na wrestled with her emotions. "I can't start a fight here." With a reluctant sigh, she placed the knife on the table. "Even though I'm confident in my close combat skills, I can't win against an awakened." Resting her chin on her hand, she sat down, her mind swirling with thoughts. How can I kill it? Determination meets defiance. After a moment of deliberation, she steeled herself and looked at you with renewed determination. "No, there's no opening. It's impossible." Breaking the silence, she said matter-of-factly, "Do you know what happens when a member of the mobile armored unit sees a slime?" You sighed heavily before replying. "Do you know what happens when someone attacks a tamed monster in front of its handler?" Without hesitation, she responded, "I'd compensate you. Now, what about the slime?" You suddenly burst into laughter. "You'd kill it. And I'm supposed to just stand by and watch? That's not funny." Fixing her with a cold gaze, he added, "I'll let you off twice, but there won't be a third time." Wu Hei-na clenched her fists in frustration. "And what will you do if I push it a third time?" You leaned forward, his tone threatening. If you're curious, go ahead and try. Grinding her teeth, she growled. Tension rising. The escalating tension between the two made Cotaeg visibly uneasy. Watching the exchange, he couldn't help but worry. Wu Hei-na's outburst. Wu Hei-na slammed her hands on the table and shouted. I'm the captain of the mobile armored unit. If you make an enemy out of me over something so trivial, you'll struggle to keep this restaurant running. Yoo Seungwoo, unfazed, smirked. And what about you? If you make an enemy out of me over this, you'll only make things harder for yourself. His gaze shifted momentarily to the other customers. I suggest we stop this psychological warfare, he said firmly, because right now, 2 of my customers are too scared to eat. Nabi intervenes. At that moment, Nabi dashed forward, standing protectively in front of young Shik, her face determined and ready for battle. When Wu Hei-na turned to Cotaeg, he shook his head and formed an X with his hands. Are you insane? Stop it. Realizing she might have gone too far, Wu Hei-na sighed in frustration, clutching her head. A moment of reflection. She replayed the scene in her mind. Holding a knife in front of civilians. Confronting a tamed slime. Behaving so recklessly. Embarrassment washed over her. Taking a deep breath, she bowed her head toward Yoo Seungwoo. I apologize, she said. I acted rudely. But you wasn't letting her off that easily. Just words. That's it. Reluctantly, she added. I'll pay for everyone's meals here today. Yoo's expression brightened. Well, in that case, I'll let it slide. But make sure you cover the extras too. Though clearly dissatisfied, she nodded. Fine. Cotaeg, observing her forced compliance, sighed. It could have been worse. She must not have received any direct orders about regressionists. Maybe she's been too preoccupied with her unit's operations to know better. Lingering thoughts. As Wu Hei-na sat quietly, her gaze drifted toward young Shik. Her thoughts wandering to a plate of slime meat. Quickly shaking the idea from her mind, she held her head in frustration, falling into silence. Later that night, after closing the restaurant, Yoo Seungwoo returned to his room. Nabi, looking exhausted, flopped onto the sofa with a sigh. Phew. What a day. Naya, she said, stretching. Then, sitting up, she looked at you and asked, Warrior, if you knew she hated slime so much, wouldn't it have been better to hide it? Naya. You sat down next to her. Unfazed. Young Shik isn't completely innocent. But it hasn't done anything wrong here. Why should I hide it? This is my restaurant. If she doesn't like it, she doesn't have to come. Nabi chuckled. Then why did you let it transform for a moment and then hide it away? Naya, everything's still going according to plan. Right. You replied casually. It's training. Training. Naya. Nabi asked, tilting her head. You explained. This morning, the kid could only hold its transformation for 10 seconds. By the end of the day, it managed to keep it for a whole minute. Danger is a great motivator. Nabi burst into laughter, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. That's why. Naya, you're so bold. Warrior. Naya. After a hearty laugh, she promptly dozed off. You glanced at her, smiling softly. She must have been more stressed than usual today. Yawning, he said to himself. Guess I should get some sleep too. Young Shik's gratitude. As the room quieted, young Shik slowly pushed the door open. Sneaking in, the slime was deeply moved, replaying Yoo's earlier words in its mind. My child. My child. It repeated to itself. Its cheeks, or the slime equivalent, glowing red with embarrassment. Carefully, young Shik inched toward the sofa where Yoo was lying. Climbing up cautiously, it snuggled close beside him. A quiet bond. What young Shik didn't realize was that Yoo wasn't fully asleep. Opening one eye, Yoo glanced down at the slime with a faint smile. And so, the 3 of them, Yoo, Nabi, and young Shik, slept peacefully together. Early morning at Yoo Seungwoo's restaurant. As soon as he opened his eyes, Yoo Seungwoo placed a hand on his forehead and sighed. Suddenly, as if realizing something, he exclaimed angrily. Oh my back. Why does it feel so sore? A moment later, he discovered the cause. Looking down, he saw Nabi and young Shik each clutching one of his legs tightly. Sighing, Yoo Seungwoo carefully picked up Nabi and muttered. Well, it's about time to get a proper bed. But then, glancing at young Shik still sound asleep, he let out a sigh of relief and thought to himself. Has this little rascal finally started to open up? Leaving the two still fast asleep, he stretched and said aloud. The menu today just needs some light tonkatsu dishes. There's not much else. Most hunters said they're busy. Looks like it's going to be a quiet day. Turning his attention to the morning, he added. With Nabi and young Shik here, I should make breakfast. However, upon opening the rice cooker, Yoo Seungwoo discovered that they were out of rice. Thinking about making soup, he realized the soup was gone as well. As for tonkatsu, they'd eaten so much of it lately that they were sick of it. Due to a mistaken order, there was a huge stockpile of pork, leading to days of serving nothing but tonkatsu. Something simple with tonkatsu that doesn't feel too heavy and works as breakfast, he pondered. Finally, he decided, a tonkatsu sandwich. As he began preparing, he explained. A sandwich is a dish known universally to Earthlings. It comes in countless varieties and flavors, with versatile recipes. Adjust the sauce, add ingredients, slap it between 2 slices of bread, and it's ready to eat. It's the food of freedom. He chuckled to himself as he pulled out a large pack of bread. This brought back memories of the first time he made a sandwich for Theo. His mind wandered to over 10 years ago, on Tera. Back then, Yoo Seungwoo, Theo, and their companions, Theodorus, G, R, Y, and Renato, had camped in the forest for a night. That night in the forest, while G, R, Y, and Renato were sound asleep, Yoo Seungwoo and Theo sat together, enjoying sandwiches. Before taking a bite, Theo gazed at the sandwich in his hand, pondering for a moment before asking, what kind of context led to the creation of this dish? Seeing Theo's curiosity, Yoo Seungwoo was surprised and asked back, context? Theo replied, every dish has its history. A delicacy like this must have a remarkable one. Feeling slightly annoyed by Theo's overthinking, Yoo Seungwoo said, it's just about putting anything between 2 slices of bread. That's it. It's about the idea of freedom, he added casually. But instead of being satisfied, Theo suddenly raised the sandwich high with enthusiasm and exclaimed, I can feel it. A free spirit unbound by anything. Then he turned to Yoo Seungwoo, saying, tell me, this must be a dish created by a free warrior, right? While munching his own sandwich, Yoo Seungwoo answered, as far as I know, it was made by someone called the Earl of Sandwich. Theo, however, became furious, throwing his sandwich to the ground and shouting, an Earl? Those damn aristocrats. Seeing this, Yoo Seungwoo hurriedly explained, hold on. He wasn't just some typical noble, he was a dedicated civil servant. This dish was made to be eaten with one hand because he was too busy to use two. Don't dismiss him as just another capitalist. But Theo refused to believe it, saying, a dish made for work? I can't accept that. Yoo Seungwoo asked, if you don't accept it, then what do you propose to do? Out of nowhere, Theo picked up the discarded sandwich, held it high, and declared, from now on, this dish shall be called Theodorus. It's a dish of freedom, and it deserves my name. Yoo Seungwoo was utterly dumbfounded, frozen in disbelief at Theo's dramatic declaration. Trying to reason with him, Yoo Seungwoo said, hey, cut it out. Do you even know what copyright is? Theo looked puzzled. What's that? Sighing deeply in resignation, Yoo Seungwoo muttered, unbelievable. Of course, you wouldn't know. Typical fantasy logic, damn it. Theo, however, was undeterred. Forget it, you communist elf, just do as you please. As Yoo Seungwoo reflected on this memory, he chuckled to himself. Unbelievable that he actually stuck to calling sandwiches Theodorus. Before long, Theodorus sandwiches spread all over Tera. Now, Theo is hailed as the god of revolution and rebellion. And sandwiches on Tera have become offerings to the gods. That guy Theo really had quite the flair for action, bringing himself back to the present. Yoo Seungwoo glanced at the sleeping Nabi and young Sig and said, looks like they're about to wake up. Turning back to his task, he began preparing ingredients for sandwiches. Let's try making hot sandwiches today. Hot sandwiches use ingredients grilled or fried, while cold sandwiches use fresh ingredients without heat. First, fry the tonkatsu, then layer cabbage on the bread. Top it with tonkatsu drenched in sauce. Done. But as he searched the kitchen cupboards, Yoo Seungwoo muttered, now, where did I put it? Suddenly, he found what he was looking for and exclaimed, there it is. Neo Bryant, the sauce for heroes, made only once a year by Arupos. He chuckled, recalling how otherworldly heroes often despised Tera's cuisine. This forbidden delicacy was created for picky heroes like that, he mused, ready to add the special touch to his sandwich, the secret sauce. And an unexpected morning, the Mee O'Brien sauce, crafted by Arupos through a method passed down for generations, was a culinary masterpiece of Tera, despite being a Tera delicacy. Its flavor was astonishingly delightful. Whether eaten fresh or grilled, it only grew richer over time. This rare sauce was so precious that even Yoo Seungwoo didn't know how to replicate it. Moreover, it was a gift from Nabi's grandmother, making it even more valuable. Its rarity was such that finding a 2-year-old bottle was already a challenge, let alone one aged 33 years. Yoo Seungwoo also had a lingering concern. The sauce was incredibly high in calories. As were most indulgent dishes, the saying the higher the calories, the better the taste rang true for Mee O'Brien, whose calorie count was astronomical. However, the effects of the pancetta he ate previously still lingered in his body. With a satisfied sigh, he completed his sandwich and announced, "Done." The aroma of the freshly prepared sandwich wafted through the air, waking up Nabi and young Shik. Nabi's soft meow startled Yoo Seungwoo, and when he turned to look, he found her drooling as she exclaimed, "It smells amazing." Seeing her reaction, Yoo Seungwoo thought to himself, "Looks like this will be fine." At that moment, Bae Kang-hyuk and Min Ho-keef arrived outside the restaurant. The enticing aroma reached them, prompting Bae Kang-hyuk to ask Min Ho-keef, "Hey, what's that amazing smell?" Min Ho-keef didn't respond, instead falling silent as they both pondered for a moment. Finally, they decided to barge in. Bae Kang-hyuk, being quicker, was the first to shout, "Boss, what dish is this incredible aroma from?" Seeing their urgency, Yoo Seungwoo could only reply, "Oh, well, it's that." Before he could finish, both Nabi and young Shig fainted from the overwhelming deliciousness of their breakfast, leaving him holding them in his arms. Even then, Bae Kang-hyuk interrupted again, shouting, "I don't care what it is, just serve it now." Min Ho-keef chimed in, pleading, "Please, Master, we're begging you." Left with no choice, Yoo Seungwoo reluctantly agreed, letting out a soft before glancing at the plate of sandwiches on the table. A moment later, the two fell silent as they savored the sandwich. However, after finishing, Bae Kang-hyuk remarked, "It's good, but..." Before he could finish, Min Ho-keef interjected, "Not as good as it smells." Yoo Seungwoo, feeling slightly embarrassed, muttered to himself, "That's because it's just a regular sandwich without me, O'Brien, serving something that made Nabi and young Shik faint would be dangerous." To cover his discomfort, he pretended to resolve, "Next time, I'll have to be more careful with the portion sizes." But Bae Kang-hyuk suddenly let out a mischievous laugh, confusing Yoo Seungwoo. "Hey, what's so funny? What's that look for?" he asked. Bae Kang-hyuk grinned and replied, "Well, something really interesting happened at the guild yesterday." This response left Yoo Seungwoo completely stunned. The turmoil at ISAC South Korea branch. In the ISAC South Korea branch office, Lee Jong-hun, the branch manager, was in a fit of frustration, pouring an entire bottle of pills into his hand and popping them into his mouth. Seeing his state, Wang Ji-yun looked on in concern and asked, "Branch manager, are you okay?" But instead of calming down, Lee Jong-hun slammed his desk in irritation. "Okay, do I look okay to you? I'm at my wit's end here. That Bae Kang-hyuk guy is out of his mind." His face turned red with anger as he ranted. Does he not have basic common sense? Even if the Wargear pilots hate slimes as much as they do, how could he pull a knife in the returnees restaurant of all places? Wang Ji-yun sighed, trying to ease the tension. Well, he is the captain of the team directly, under the director general. Perhaps there's some meaning to his actions. Before she could finish, Lee Jong-hun interrupted, "Exactly. That's the point." His abrupt tone startled her. Lee Jong-hun rubbed his temples before explaining. "This is a test from the Director General." "The Director's test? Test?" she repeated in confusion. "Yes," he confirmed, leaning back in his chair. "The Director General's eyes and ears are everywhere across the globe. I'm sure they're already aware of the presence of a slime in that restaurant." Wang Ji-yun tilted her head. "But what kind of test is this, exactly?" Clenching the armrests of his chair, Lee Jong-hun elaborated. "It's a dual-purpose test. For me, it's a reprimand for not reporting information about the slime to higher-ups. And for Captain Woo Hina, it's a test of her ability to handle promotion-level tasks." He stood up, pacing near her. A sharp reprimand for my oversight. And for Woo Hina, well, she's competing against Maxim Vysotsky for a promotion. This mishap could ruin her chances. The gravity of the situation made Wang Ji-yun gasp. A promotion test like this? Seriously? Instead of answering, Lee Jong-hun's silence hung heavy in the air. The stakes, realizing how serious the situation was. She sighed and muttered, "This is bad, really bad. Captain Woo Hina is going to be furious." You know how she gets. Branch manager. Her comment made him stop pacing and face her. Are you saying this is because her husband was attacked by a slime? His bluntness made her frown. Well, you're straightforward, aren't you? He shook his head and continued grimly. Even so, there's no justification for watching the captain die 5 times over. A commander who lets their emotions cloud their judgment loses the right to lead. A leader must maintain a clear head because they bear the lives of more than just 1 or 2 people. Wang Ji-yun nodded solemnly. I understand. So, what's the penalty for Captain Woo Hina? Lee Jong-hun replied without hesitation. A 1-month salary reduction for lack of leadership. And a week of remote work to reflect on her actions. Wang Ji-yun turned away. Her face shadowed with resignation. I'll handle it, however, as he rested his head on his hand. Deep in thought, she suddenly spoke up. If we keep doing things this way, people will eventually leave. It's too strict. Sir, and inefficient. Before she could finish her sentence, he interrupted. Wait, inefficient? How could that be? Meanwhile, at Yoo Seungwoo's place, after hearing Baek Hang-hyuk's story, he asked, docked a month's salary and can find a home for a week? Sitting next to him, Min Ok-hee saw his cheerful expression and complained. You're finding joy in someone else's misery, huh? He nonchalantly replied. Which made Min Ok-hee grumble in dissatisfaction. Humph. After a moment, Yoo Seungwoo commented, speaking of which, Hina's husband. As soon as he mentioned her husband, Baek Hang-hyuk cut in. Oh, you mean that frying pan guy? Yoo Seungwoo reprimanded him. You shouldn't call him that. Baek Hang-hyuk obediently replied. I'll be careful, but what about him? Yoo Seungwoo quickly asked. Even with advanced modern medicine, is it impossible to treat him? Prosthetics are widespread. And even wound regeneration has made progress. Hearing this, Min Ok-hee hesitated before saying. Well, it's hard to say if that person is lucky or unlucky. Yoo Seungwoo immediately asked, lucky? Typically, warrior pilots don't survive slime attacks, but Min Ok-hee revealed. That person is still alive. Yoo Seungwoo was astonished. Could it be that they've awakened? Min Ok-hee then proposed a hypothesis. It's possible they have regenerative abilities, even if their limbs are severed. The regeneration could still be strong, but before Min Ok-hee could finish, Yoo Seungwoo interrupted, I see. Pretty unlucky. Huh? Min Ok-hee agreed. Exactly, especially regarding their safe point. When Min Ok-hee mentioned the safe point, Yoo Seungwoo started pondering. A safe point. Those with regenerative abilities can identify the starting point of their regeneration. Once the starting point is determined, they remain in that state. After a moment of thought, Yoo Seungwoo sighed and asked, could their safe point be after their face melted? Min Ok-hee candidly confirmed, yes. That's why surgery or machinery won't help. At this, he sighed deeply, resolutely. He declared. One day, I'll meet that person. Which left both Min Ok-hee and Baek Hang-hyuk stunned. Min Ok-hee even asked, could it be that you know how to treat them? Yoo Seungwoo gently replied, if one is determined, nothing is impossible. However, Baek Hang-hyuk dismissed it. That's not helpful at all. Going to someone's house just to argue, what good does that do? Because of this remark, Min Ok-hee punched him in the stomach and retorted, hey. Infuriated, Baek Hang-hyuk shouted, you're just pretending to be noble and worried about others. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't help. It was precisely because of that foolish comment that Baek Hang-hyuk was struck hard by Min Ok-hee, who gritted her teeth and said, grow up a little. Angered, he grabbed Min Ok-hee by the collar and snapped, you bastard. Wanna fight? No sooner had the words left his mouth than the two started brawling. Yoo Seungwoo could only silently watch the scene unfold. After a moment, he calmly said, I understand. That remark caused both of them to stop fighting and look at him. Confused, seeing that he had their attention, Yoo Seungwoo continued. I'm someone who believes in active retaliation. That's why I can understand the feelings of someone like Woo Hae-na, and that's why I want to help. Min Ok-hee, still puzzled, asked, retaliation? That's a strange thing for you to say, he quickly clarified. People often say revenge is meaningless, but that's not entirely true. Shifting his perspective, he added, if Nabi were attacked by a slime, I wouldn't forgive whoever was responsible. Besides, those warriors defended my homeland while I wasn't there, didn't they? Of course, I owe it to them to repay that debt. Hearing his words and then noticing Nabi happily playing with young Shik, both Min Ok-hee and Baek Hang-hyuk were even more astonished. After a moment of hesitation, Min Ok-hee said, you're not harboring any ulterior motives, are you? Baek Hang-hyuk chimed in, yeah, that expression of yours. I've seen it somewhere before. But Yoo Seungwoo simply smiled and playfully replied, not at all. I'm really going to treat them. However, deep inside his mind, he thought, how terrifying. At this moment, Yoo Seungwoo asked Min Ok-hee and Baek Hang-hyuk to wait, while he headed into the kitchen. As he worked, he thought to himself, the dish I'm about to make shall be called a new beginning. The first ingredient was the fruit of the Cusco tree, though extremely bitter. It had a stimulating effect similar to coffee and was widely used as a substitute for caffeine on Tera. Next was killermans, a unique carrot-like vegetable with an incredibly sour taste and a charge of electricity. In fact, it literally carried an electric current. This property developed because killermans grew under frequent lightning strikes, making all mature killermans highly electrified, so much so that, if consumed raw without any preparation, it could knock out even a decently sized monster in one go. The preparation for a new beginning involved grinding the two ingredients into a paste and cooking them together. When Baek Hang-hyuk saw him crushing the ingredients, he panicked and shouted, Owner, the dish you're making, could it be that dish? Hearing the commotion, Yoo Seungwoo turned and asked, you've had it before? Baek Hang-hyuk, now sweating nervously, gritted his teeth and thought to himself, of course, I've eaten it before during my time on Tera. If anyone eats that stuff, even their body might need to be treated afterward. While Baek Hang-hyuk trembled in fear, Yoo Seungwoo remained focused on grinding the ingredients, casually replying, it's effective, isn't it? Internally, though, he muttered to himself, that flavor truly is a medicine, a substance capable of restoring physical stamina to anyone who tries it once. In dire situations, whether disarming a poison trap, battling cursed forces of the demon King's army, or surviving a perilous quest, without such restorative medicine, one would surely perish. A moment later, as Baek Hang-hyuk calmed down, he began ranting, drumming his fingers on the table. Durable equipment is expensive. Rookie adventurers can't even afford surplus goods. And those smug mages with their recovery spells act so high and mighty. But before he could finish, Min O'Keefe interrupted. Having no way to recover is the worst-case scenario. This irritated Baek Hang-hyuk, who shouted back, fine, then, it really is the worst. That useless place is Tera. Min O'Keefe, annoyed, retorted, but seeing as you're still alive, there must have been a solution. Right, frustrated, Baek Hang-hyuk snapped. Of course there was, damn it. Meanwhile, Yoo Seungwoo paid no attention to their argument. He remained focused on cooking and thought to himself, this is the answer. A new beginning. A secret recipe discovered by the pilgrims of Tera, with simple preparation and ingredients easily found in rural homes. It provided astonishing benefits, healing wounds and restoring some stamina, because of its unparalleled convenience and efficacy. It had saved countless lives on Tera. As Baek Hang-hyuk and Min O'Keefe continued bickering, Baek scoffed, how could anyone not know that Tera's food is the worst? It's utterly vile. He didn't stop there, exclaiming, it even flies off, literally. Buff or debuff. Whatever you call it, anyone who eats it explodes. The dish's physical potency can send any abnormal condition skyrocketing into oblivion. Min O'Keefe stared at him, confused, but Baek Hang-hyuk, growing more agitated, raised both hands and shouted, yes. It flies, exactly as written. Buff or debuff, it doesn't matter. Anyone who eats it goes boom. Due to the dish's sheer physical power, it could eliminate any negative conditions affecting the eater. Whether it tasted good was irrelevant. It felt like a trip to hell, frankly. One might as well just head straight to hell instead. Min O'Keefe, horrified, asked. What? Realizing he had let too much slip, Baek Hang-hyuk quickly apologized. Ah, sorry, my bad. A second later, Min O'Keefe fell into thought and muttered, So, this dish has both harmful and beneficial effects. Truly a creation of fantasy. Seeing that Min O'Keefe seemed unsure, Yoo Seungwoo continued cooking while explaining. Regenerative abilities are passive skills, so they only temporarily stop functioning. Min O'Keefe interjected, meanwhile, if you rely on healing magic or surgery. Before she could finish, Yoo Seungwoo cut in. A new beginning, as the name suggests, is exactly that. Hearing this, Min O'Keefe praised him. As expected, Captain Wu Hei Na will surely be delighted. But how are you planning to deal with the shock that comes after eating it? Yoo Seungwoo replied cheerfully, why would I worry about that? This left both Min O'Keefe and Baek Hang-hyuk exclaiming in unison, what? He explained. They need to face punishment for causing trouble at the restaurant. Right, at this. Both Min O'Keefe and Baek Hang-hyuk froze in fear. Unable to speak, Yoo Seungwoo added. Otherwise, I would have just brought out an elixir from the start. Baek Hang-hyuk, visibly annoyed, muttered. Sometimes I can't tell if you're stingy or generous. Boss, Yoo Seungwoo laughed loudly and replied. Either way, just say I'm considerate. Both Min O'Keefe and Baek Hang-hyuk forced out awkward laughs and shared a silent thought. We'd better not cross the boss. At Isaac's sector, a branch, in the basement maintenance room for war gear. Kale, the head of maintenance, stood watching the machinery operate. A moment later, someone approached him and said, Head Kale, everything's ready. Kale, whose real name was Kim Kwi Nam, but who used an alias because he disliked sound of his real name, cheerfully responded, good. He walked over and added, we have 23 hours left before the war gear showcase. This is the final step, so let's do it carefully. The other person nodded and replied, yes, sir. The subordinate then hesitated before saying, by the way, about your wife's sister, it's such a pity. Kale was momentarily surprised but then turned away with a sigh. Saying, it's fine, the only regret is the delayed promotion. After all, that guy holds grudges for a long time. He muttered to himself. When was it that I got burned by slime? Even now, it's still the same. The subordinate scratched his head awkwardly, Suddenly, Kale hugged the subordinate, pinched his cheek playfully, and said with a smile, don't mind it. My face being ruined isn't anything new. The subordinate, flustered, replied. How can I not mind, sir? Seeing the concern, Kale smiled, really? Well, in any case, let's just keep at it. Go check the high power generator and the motion control systems. The subordinate nodded. Yes, understood. After they left, Kale watched them go for a moment before his expression darkened. He muttered quietly. Stay strong, Woo-hena, otherwise, the rest of the team will be in danger. He then turned toward the machine, conflicted. Honestly, I'd like to return and lend everyone my strength. But, staring at the machinery a bit longer, Kale put on his headphones and shook himself out of it. Stop overthinking, time to work. Quickly, he commanded his team. All right, everyone, the first button press is critical. This showcase will let the residents of Sector A know that war gear is safe. Let's make it a success. Prioritize safety and avoid accidents. The team responded in unison, yes, sir. Kale meticulously tightened bolts one last time. When he was confident everything was perfect, he let out a sigh of relief. Just then, someone arrived to see Kale. Min O'Keefe, upon seeing him for the first time, said, Pardon my intrusion, sir. Kale looked surprised, as he didn't know Min O'Keefe. However, his surprise turned to annoyance when Min O'Keefe addressed him. You're Woo-hena's husband, Kim Kwi Nam, right? Kale was startled and angrily retorted. It's not Kim Kwi Nam, it's Kale. He pointed a wrench toward Min O'Keefe. Clearly agitated, Min O'Keefe quickly raised his hands and said, Yes, Kale, I'm here to deliver something to you. After observing Min O'Keefe for a moment, Kale thought to himself. Wait a minute, this guy, he's one of the key figures in Sector A. Kale immediately adjusted his attitude and asked, Are you here about my wife? Min O'Keefe replied, Not exactly, but it's somewhat related. Kale was taken aback when Min O'Keefe handed him a bottle of medicine along with a note, saying, I came here today because I have something important to discuss with you. On the day of the trial showcase, Kale commanded. Commence the A-Sector War Gear Showcase. Immediately, numerous robots marched onto the stage. And the crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Seeing this, Kale sighed in relief and said, Phew, All those overtime hours preparing for this were worth it. At least it benefits me too. He touched his face, now fully restored, and smiled. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had with Min O'Keefe that day. Kale had asked, after assigning support staff and medics, do I really have to drink this? Will it truly heal my face? Min O'Keefe had responded confidently, yes. Besides, what do you have to lose? You've already hit rock bottom. Recalling those words, Kale thought as he looked at the bottle of medicine. He was right, there's no harm in trying. When Kale finally drank the medicine, he immediately felt a change within his body along with its peculiar taste. Grimacing, he exclaimed. What is this flavor? He muttered to himself. It's like I boiled mugwort and garlic for 100 years. Suddenly, an explosion occurred, startling everyone present. When Kale woke up, he found himself surrounded by doctors and nurses tending to him. Catching his reflection in a mirror, he was stunned. Although people used to mock him with a ridiculous nickname, Exploding Fart Kim Queen Ohm, he now thought to himself, so what? My face is healed, and I can blink both eyes again. He smiled at the thought of his wife's joy, and sure enough, Woo Haina stood nearby, crying tears of happiness as she looked at him. Now, with his restored face, Kale smirked and sarcastically said, ridiculous nicknames? Who cares? But then someone jabbed him in the side and said, hey, Captain. Irritated, Kale replied, huh? Captain who? All I know is Exploding Fart Kim Queen Ohm. The person awkwardly responded, are you still mad about that nickname? All right, we were wrong. Then they asked, Captain, are you going to become a hunter now? Surprised, Kale asked, huh? Why? The person explained, I heard your regenerative abilities are incredibly strong. Don't you feel like it's a waste to stick with maintenance? Annoyed, Kale shouted, do you even know what people with regenerative abilities do? They're tanks, meat shields meant to take hits. I'm the only son of 3 generations of the Kim family. Why would I subject myself to that just to make money? The person persisted, but it's a lot of money. Don't you have a kid to support? Kale explained, I'm not short on money. The important thing is work-life balance. My wife and I both work, so we live quite comfortably. Hearing this, the person finally stopped questioning and said, well, living comfortably is good then. However, Kale had already figured out their true intentions. He stepped closer and said, don't think I don't know what you're up to. If I leave this position, you'd take over as captain, wouldn't you? Caught off guard, the person stammered, what? Of course not. But internally, they thought, he's sharper than I gave him credit for. Afterward, Kale decided not to give the person next to him a hard time inside. Well, anyway, what should I give my benefactor as a gift? The person suggested, how about that scroll? But Kale, visibly annoyed, snapped back, are you planning a housewarming party or something? I made a mistake asking you. I'll just ask my wife. With that, he pulled out his phone and dialed his wife. As soon as she answered, he spoke tenderly. Darling, it's me. I don't know what to give my benefactor as a gift. Oh, that's a good idea, of course. You're amazing as always. The person beside him couldn't hide their discomfort and thought to themselves. So cheesy. A few days later, at Yoo Seungwoo's restaurant, he received Kale's gift, a brand new oven. After staring at it for a moment, he cheerfully said, an oven? Good choice. He must have remembered our kitchen. Alright, I'll add bread to the menu. However, Wang Jihyun was stunned by his reaction and asked, wait, you run a restaurant, and you're only getting an oven now? Embarrassed, Yoo Seungwoo scratched his head and replied, an oven? Well, I just thought it wasn't necessary for the restaurant. It's complicated. Jihyun looked puzzled, so he explained. Ovens heat the air to cook ingredients, which leads to severe energy inefficiency. So, electricity bills are insanely high. He froze in fear at the thought and added. Sometimes I still remember the days I lived in a tiny rented room. Maybe it's just a habitual fear, that's why I never bought one. Wang Jihyun remained silent for a moment, then asked. So, is it okay because it's a gift? He replied cheerfully. No, this one uses charcoal. As long as I can catch a coal monster, we'll have endless fuel. Right then, Nabi appeared, excitedly saying. Cooking with charcoal makes the food taste better. Meow. Suddenly, Yoo Seungwoo remembered something and shouted. Oh, I think he also gave gifts to Nabi and Young Shik. The gift turned out to be a self-driving grass cutter that doubled as a rideable cart. As soon as Yuna and Nabi saw it, they eagerly climbed on and drove it around. Yuna shouted joyfully. This is so much fun. The package also included an apology letter from Hana. And a special suit made from impact-absorbing material for Young Shik. Young Shik exclaimed. This is amazing, I forgive him. The children laughed and played together. And Yoo Seungwoo watched them from a corner, commenting. The weather's nice, so the kids are having fun. Then he added, let's close the restaurant today. Hearing this, Wang Jihyun turned red with frustration. She gritted her teeth and thought, seriously? Are you running this place as a hobby? Open when you like, close when you like. Since she had recently received orders from her superiors. She said aloud. Our bosses want us to encourage hunters to eat here. So I've been working day and night. I even developed a review app to promote the restaurant. And here you are, driving me crazy. But his next words shocked her even more. Close the restaurant, let's make pizza tonight. Since we have an oven now, we can make pizza with lots of toppings. She broke into a sweat and stammered, pie? Pizza? Seeing her reaction, he asked hesitantly. If you have time, Jihyun. Suddenly, her attitude changed. With a cheerful tone, she said. Flipping the sign is all it takes. Right? He replied, confused. Yes, that's it. Because Wang Jihyun's biggest weakness was her love for food. She muttered irritably to herself. If the boss says to close. What can I even say? At Cyberdyne headquarters. In the underground nuclear bunker. After watching footage of Kale drinking the medicine provided by Minho Keef, Joo Hyuk-jin zoomed in on Kale's face to scrutinize his expression. A moment later, Joo Hyuk-jin remarked calmly, that guy, Kim Kwi-nam, has guts. He wasn't like this before. There was no guarantee the medicine would work. Yet he chugged it down like that. What if it had been poisoned? COTAEG quickly reported, but the treatment was successful. Sir. Joo Hyuk-jin nodded, of course. It had to be successful. Will he return? COTAEG replied. No, he said he'd rather die than return to Wargear. He also won't become a hunter. Hearing this, Joo Hyuk-jin asked, because he has a family now, right? How old is his son? 2 years old. Sir. COTAEG responded immediately. Joo Hyuk-jin grunted in approval. Good. Then, he issued an order. Lower Yoo Seungwoo's threat level from SSS to C. COTAEG was surprised and asked, are you serious? Sir. That's a bold decision. Joo Hyuk-jin explained, even after being humiliated by Hai Na. He didn't resort to violence. He even treated her husband. As promised. Furthermore. He continued. Baek Kong-hyuk, Min Ok-hee, Wang Ji-yun, and even you. Your average combat effectiveness has increased by 10%. That's a remarkable figure. He always complains about how burdensome it is to support an elite team. But he managed to cook such difficult dishes. If there were a golden medal of valor, I'd want to award it to him. This left COTAEG feeling awkward, and he hesitantly replied. Well, about that. Before he could finish, Joo Hyuk-jin interrupted. I know touching this subject could cause problems. COTAEG quickly agreed. Then let's leave it at that. Joo Hyuk-jin nodded. Fine. He stood and added. I've chosen the captain of the composite armored unit. And assessed the capability of the Sector A leader. We've laid the groundwork to elevate the hunters with a focus on Sector A. Let's end the discussion here for today. Although slightly surprised, COTAEG responded, understood. As Joo Hyuk-jin turned to leave, COTAEG hesitated and said, excuse me, Director. When will you return to Korea? The young lady misses you greatly. Joo Hyuk-jin fell silent for a moment before quietly replying. I'm sorry, but I can't return for the time being. It seems my workload will only increase. Please convey my apologies to her. Currently, Joo Hyuk-jin holds the positions of CO of Cyberdyne and Director General of ISAC.